get this thing started now. Oh, and by the way, Peg has some more of my slides. If anyone would like another copy, she's going to be walking through here. And you're welcome.
Gary, you want to? Oh, good.
No, we're doing it. Thanks, Harvey. First of all, I'd like to thank you, Harvey, personally. I met you about 5 years ago or 4 years ago here, and you were one of the first people actually to encourage me on this wild expedition that I was on for the last 4 or 5 years. That was shortly after Wayne Gitzen died. And I don't know if any of you know who Wayne Gitzen was, or he was. He died in 2005. He was an anthropology graduate, and he was also a member of OAS for quite a number of years. I don't know if he spoke here, but I know he did speak about this topic a few times. And when Wayne died and passed away back in 2005, he gave me his personal library and all his research papers. And I knew Wayne for about 20 years, and I really took that as a great honor and a big responsibility. In fact, that's one of the reasons why I'm here this evening. It's a responsibility for the information I put together. And again, I want to thank Harvey for believing in me, and just thank you, Harvey. I don't know if any of you know Herb Beals. I've actually never met Herb, but he reviewed my book and helped me out on the book. And Herb is a member of the Drake. He's a member of the Society for the History of Discoveries. He's actually a fellow there, and he's written a number of books on the Spanish exploration of the 1700s and 1800s. He's also written some books about the porcelain in Nehalem Bay with Harvey, and I read all of Herb's books, and I'm quite proud to have Harvey and Herb in my corner. Let's see, I'm still trying to figure out how to remember. Francis Drake in Nehalem Bay, setting the historical record straight.
Can you use the microphone?
I'm sorry?
Can you use the microphone?
Well, they warmed me up with this thing. Does this work any better? I don't really know. I don't know if they would warm me up with this. Is that better?
Oh, yes.
Oh, good. Thank you. About 10 years ago, I was in Portland developing some photographs, and there were two women in front of me who were developing their photographs, and they were beautiful. They were from Turkey, and they were from all these different colored spices and these containers, and they had some photographs from Italy with the flowers in the windows, with the multiple colored shutters and walls and things. And they were just gorgeous. And then I started developing mine. They were just boats and some things. And the lady said, where are yours from? And I said, oh, it's a secret. I can't tell you. And she said, oh, no, come on, you can tell me. And I said, they're Garibaldi. And she said, oh, I thought it was someplace exotic. Well, I said, it is. It just happens to be close. And that's what Nehalem Bay is. It's exotic. It just happens to be close. So, and then I say, well, where is Nehalem Bay? Nehalem Bay is, if we describe it as Lewis and Clark did, is 40 miles southeast of Point Adams. And it's 4 miles south of Manzanita and 23 miles south of, or north of Tillamook on Highway 101. Who was Francis Drake? Well, a lot of you probably know who Francis Drake was, but Francis Drake was the first English captain to sail around the world. He was actually the first European for Pacific Northwest contact with the Native Americans. And he always represented the Queen in England as a great country. He would dine on gold and silver tableware, and he would have live musicians playing in the background. He was quite a gentleman, other than, or a lot of people don't realize that. And he was in charge of the world's most complicated machine, the Golden Hind. You think about it, what was really going on in about the 16th, 17th century. The Papal Bull, which was given to, the lands were given to Spain, which ultimately created their trade and monopoly. And he fought against that for most of his life. That's sort of like what Drake was all about. Magellan and his ship, the Victoria, left in 1519, and his ship, the Victoria, returned in 1522 without him. That's why Drake was the first European captain. John Mauritius, some of you probably recognize that name, and I have an old system, and if you notice this slide here has this triangulation sitting over the top of the text. I apologize for that, but my system doesn't show that. This newer one does. But that is actually the first triangulation diagram that was written, and that was in 1533. However, it was only a theory. It was not proven. The first English language book to have a survey or a triangulation was this book that was written in 1556, and then shortly after that, Drake was sailing the world on his epic voyage. Am I going slow enough, Peg? She always tells me to slow down. And everyone can hear me. Okay. And then if we go into the 17th century, you can all read this. Galileo supports the Copernican system, and the Mayflower lands in Plymouth, and Isaac Newton's laws of gravity were 100 years after Drake, actually. The real mystery here is, where did Drake stay for his 5-week sight in 1579? There were actually 18 theoretical sites people proposing where Drake spent his time. And I'm here with one of those. But the other sites are Whale Cove in Oregon. Probably don't know where that is, near Depot Bay. The other one is Point Reyes, which actually is also Drake's Bay, Drake's Cove, and Drake Estuary. They're all vying for their own individual sites in Nehalem Bay. And Nehalem Bay is what I've been doing for about the last 5 years. I've been concentrating on Drake and Nehalem Bay, and before that I was doing local history in the Nehalem Valley area for 10 years, and before that I was doing Indians, Pacific Northwest Indians. I've been studying those for about 23 years. California or not? I just love this one personally. The California State Commission on Francis Drake in 1974 said it would take a leap of faith to say that Francis Drake landed in Drake's Bay or any other bay in California. Even then, after that, the governor of California in 1976 appointed a Francis Drake Commission to publicize the 1979 anniversary, 400-year anniversary of Francis Drake. And this is where a lot of the false publicity has been derived. This includes a plate of brass in an Oregon State Park. It happens to be at South Cove near Coos Bay, and it was promoted by the California Drake's Navigator Guild, and it was placed there by the California Quadcentennial Commission. And I should say that here's one of their monuments that they have to Francis Drake down in California. These are some of the things we'll be covering in this talk for the next 20, 30 minutes or so, 40 minutes. And I'd like to add, there are no independent dissenters to my work other than those pushing their own Drake landing theories, of whom I'm hoping to debate at another time, but not tonight. I will accept questions at the end of my talk. Because my work could be construed to be any other Oregon site, I'll let you know why Whales Cove should not be the site when the topics come up. There's a limited historical record because when Drake got back, the Queen confiscated all of Drake's maps, charts, journals, and almost all the hard evidence comes from 3 main areas up here that you see: a map, a book, or a journal, and depositions by Francis Drake's cousin. And in the World Encompassed, I picked just 3 things tonight: Drake's land survey, the Nehalem Indians, and the islands of St. James. And then with John Drake, his cousin, I'm talking about his depositions and Tallows Bark, which I'm sure as the Archaeological Society, you'll all be interested in that, what I had to say, hopefully. The Hondius map he was a Dutch map maker. He was a copper plate map maker. And this slide jumped in here on me, but we're talking about 4 different corners here that are called broadsides right here on this map. In fact, because this jumped up on me, let me see if I can go back to this. Oh, yeah. This is actually showing Drake's path of his navigation around the world to get to where he went, and then the 4 broadsides. The other 3 broadsides here, this one here, this one here, and this one here, all the historians and scholars pretty much agree they're pretty well represented and they're accurate. This one here, they disagree with. Everyone sort of says, well, was it or was it not an accurate representation of Port Nova Albion or New England? And I say that it is, and the reason why I say that it is there are a number of different areas that you can compare this with. And that's in this slide here. That's in this slide here. And if you notice right here, this is a overlay of Nehalem Bay, or the Honduras map overlay on Nehalem Bay. And if you see right here, this is what I call the peninsula, and this is what's called the spit today. This was all planted by the state of Oregon from the 50s and the 60s, and it was nothing really but just a big sandbar at the time. And then here, I call this the peninsula, and that peninsula is still there in Nehalem Bay. If we look at this area right here, this is called Fisher's Point, and if we look on the Honduras map, that's Fisher's Point. And this island, I call this an island, is still there also. In fact, for those who are going to be coming down for the tour on Saturday, we'll go out and walk on that island a little bit. You'll be able to see how much of a major elevation that is. And then if we go to the next slide, by the way, we'll go to the next slide. Here's an aerial map of this from the 50s. One thing I'd like to say is I did have to turn it a little bit just to kind of line up with the oceans here. And I think that's legitimate to be doing that and still being able to compare it. And if you look again, you can see this is the peninsula, the same peninsula over here, and then this is the sandbar, and then this area right here is the island that I'm talking about. And if you notice, the fine lines all around the Honduras map, these are all fine lines all the way around. And the fine lines, and I don't know if you can see it so well, even though this is on a big screen, the fine lines that are around the fort that they built, or Drake left. Those fine lines right there, there's what's called Alder Creek that flows into Nehalem Bay right there, which is the main creek that flows into Nehalem Bay other than the river, upriver. Someone did ask me, they said, well, why do you think, an archaeologist asked me the other day, why do you think they didn't draw the river in there? And I said, well, it probably wasn't important. You can only draw a certain size of a map anyway. And besides that, it was all just a bunch of snags at the time. That river's been channeled up there above that, if anyone's familiar with that area. There actually are 10 areas that you can compare this map with the Honduras map, but for the lack of time, so to speak, we'll move on to there. But it's all in the book, too. Well, let's look how the California bays in the Honduras map line up. If we look at this one here, we have to turn this, I don't know, that's about 200 degrees to turn it upside down to fit in Drake's Cove. This one here, it's 180 degrees. That's real easy to fit in Drake's estuary. To me, they don't line up to me. It's just kind of ridiculous, but they keep saying it is. In the World Encompass, this is the second area. We talked about the Honduras map. Now we're going to talk about the World Encompass. Reverend Francis Fletcher, he actually was the first-hand journal. He was the first-hand person to write the information down on Drake's journey, and he was with Drake, obviously. And the World Encompass talks about